Welcome to section 15.1. This is the 156th session of the CISSP exam prep series. In this session, we'll learn how to build a program that keeps your controls honest. We'll answer several questions. What are the 3 building blocks of such a program? How do you decide what to test and how often? How is an assessment more than a scan? Why must an audit be independent? Who controls each type of audit? And what standards frame the whole effort? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a control that worked to install can quietly rot. Picture a payment gateway whose firewall rule was loosened during a rushed release. Nobody noticed, and the hole sat open for months. A discipline testing program is what catches that drift before an attacker does. On the job, you are the person who proves the defenses still work, not just that they once did. So what are the 3 building blocks of the program? Think of them as 3 lenses on the same controls. Tests confirm that a specific control still functions. Assessments step back and review the whole security posture of an environment. Audits bring in an independent party to vouch for that posture to outsiders. And whatever you build must hold up everywhere you run, on-premise, in the cloud, and across hybrid setups. Design once, but validate in every location. How do you decide what to test and how often? You let risk set the schedule, not convenience. Weigh how critical and sensitive the system is, how likely the control is to fail or be misconfigured, and how often its configuration changes. Then balance that against the cost, the disruption, and the resources each test consumes. A card processing platform might get an automated scan every night, with an expensive manual test just once a year, frequent and cheap where it can run itself, rare and deep where a human must dig. Why isn't running the test enough on its own? Because a test that nobody reads tells you nothing. Someone has to interpret the output and confirm each check actually completed. Some results need a trained analyst reading between the lines. Others are handled by tooling that stays silent until it finds something worth your attention. When it does, it fires an alert, emails the team, or opens a ticket. The finding only matters once a human closes the loop. How is an assessment more than a scan? Because it adds judgment on top of the tooling. A trained professional studies the environment, weighs current and future threats, and considers what the target is actually worth. The main deliverable is a report written for management in plain language, ending in concrete recommendations. You can run it in-house or hand it to an outside team with the right expertise. Picture a fire marshal who not only checks that the alarms beep, but tells you which exits to widen first. What exactly does an assessor examine? A widely used framework breaks the target into 4 kinds of objects. Specifications are the paper trail, the policies, procedures, and designs. Mechanisms are the actual controls built into hardware, software, or firmware. Activities are the human actions, like running backups or exporting logs. And individuals are the people who carry all of that out. An assessor may inspect any of these, interview the people, and directly test whether the controls hold. Why must an audit be independent? Because the people who build a control cannot fairly grade their own homework. Tests and assessments are for your own eyes, aimed at finding improvements. An audit exists to prove your controls work to someone else, so it demands an impartial reviewer with no stake in the outcome. That outside view is what a board, a regulator, or a partner will actually trust. Independence is the whole point, not a formality. What makes an internal audit different? It is run by your own audit staff, but with a deliberate wall between them and the teams they judge. That independence comes from the reporting line. The chief audit executive typically reports straight to the chief executive or even the governing board, not to the managers whose controls are under review. The audience is internal leadership. Think of an inspector who works for the airline but answers only to the very top. What sets an external audit apart? It is performed by an outside firm hired to give a verdict the market will believe. Because that firm has no operational stake, its opinion carries weight with investors and regulators. The largest engagements often go to one of the so-called Big 4 accounting firms, whose sign-off is broadly accepted. Here is the subtle point for the exam. The firm is outside the organisation, but the organisation still hires and pays it. What makes a third-party audit different again? The trick is asking who controls it. In a third-party audit, some other organization, like a regulator, commissions the review and sets its scope. You are being audited on someone else's terms. Now line up the three by control. Internal audits are inside your control. External audits are outside your control, but you still hire the auditor. Third-party audits are outside the whole enterprise's control, driven by an outsider. How do service providers avoid auditing exhaustion? Imagine a hosting company forced to sit through a fresh audit for every customer that asks. To spare that pain, a standard lets a provider undergo one external review and share the resulting report with many clients. These engagements go by a common name: System and Organization Controls Reports. They come in three flavors. The first covers controls that touch financial reporting. The second covers security and privacy and stays confidential under agreement. The third also covers security and privacy, but is meant for public sharing. What is the difference between the two report types? It comes down to point in time versus over time. A Type 1 report is the auditor's opinion on whether the controls are well designed, checked on paper at a single moment. A Type 2 report goes further and confirms the controls actually operated properly across an extended stretch, often half a year or more. Type 2 is the stronger claim because someone independently watched the controls run. Design on paper is a promise. Operation over time is proof. What standards frame the whole effort? A standard gives you the control objectives to measure against, so everyone agrees on the yardstick. One common governance framework spells out what organizations should have in place around their information systems. A widely used international pair goes further. One describes how to stand up an information security management system, and its companion details the specific controls. Organizations can even become formally certified against that management system standard. Pick your yardstick first, then measure. So let's bring it together. A testing program rests on three building blocks. Tests confirm a control works, assessments review the whole posture, and audits prove it to outsiders. Let risk drive what you test and how often, and always read the results. Assessors examine specifications, mechanisms, activities, and individuals. Sort audits by who controls them: internal, external, or third party. And frame the work against recognized standards. Get these right, and your defenses stay provably strong. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 15.2, Part 1. This is the 157th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll get our bearings on finding weaknesses before an attacker does. We'll answer several questions. What is a vulnerability assessment really doing? How does the community agree on a shared vocabulary? What do vulnerability scans actually cover? Who else has these same tools? And how does discovery scanning map a network? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because you cannot fix what you have never seen. Picture a retailer that spun up a dozen forgotten test servers over the years. Each one is a door nobody is watching. A vulnerability assessment is the flashlight that finds those doors before someone else walks through them. On the job, this is how you turn a vague worry into a concrete, prioritized list of things to fix. So, what is a vulnerability assessment really doing? It hunts for weaknesses in your systems and controls. A vulnerability is simply a flaw that a threat could exploit. Scans and penetration tests shine a light on those flaws in your technical defenses, mostly through automated means. The payoff is a roadmap. You learn which weaknesses carry unacceptable risk, so you can fix those first. Think of it as a home inspection that lists every loose lock before you move in. How does the community agree on a shared vocabulary? Through a common protocol that standardizes how we describe and automate security checks. Without it, every tool would speak its own dialect and nothing would line up. This shared framework lets different security systems exchange findings cleanly and compare notes. It is the reason a flaw flagged by one scanner means the same thing to another. Picture air traffic control. Everyone uses the same phrasing so no message gets lost. What sits inside that shared framework? Several naming and scoring standards, each with a job. One gives every known vulnerability a unique name, so we all point at the same flaw. Another scores how severe a vulnerability is on a common scale. Others name configuration problems and name operating systems, applications, and devices consistently. Two more provide languages, one for writing security checklists and one for describing testing procedures. Together, they are the shared dictionary and grammar of vulnerability work. What do vulnerability scans actually cover? They automatically probe systems, applications, and networks for exploitable weaknesses. The tools turn tedious manual checking into a quick, repeatable run, and most can be scheduled to repeat on their own. Better still, they compare today's results against yesterday's, so you can watch your risk shift over time. There are 4 broad flavors: network discovery scans, network vulnerability scans, web application scans, and database scans. Each answers a different slice of the same question: where am I exposed? Who else has these same tools? Attackers do, and they use them exactly the way you do. The same point-and-click scanners that help defenders also help intruders find the softest target. Before an attack, malicious actors often scan systems and networks to zero in on the weakest link. It is a sobering reminder that scanning is neutral. The tool does not care whose hand is on it. Assume the adversary already knows what an open scanner would reveal. How does discovery scanning map a network? It sweeps a range of addresses looking for systems with open network ports. A discovery scan does not test for vulnerabilities itself. It simply draws the map, showing which hosts exist and which ports the firewalls along the path leave exposed. That map is the starting point for everything deeper. Think of a burglar first walking the block to note which houses have doors and windows before ever trying a handle. What tricks does a scanner use to find open ports? It sends specially shaped packets and reads how the system reacts. One technique sends a single connection request and watches for the handshake to begin, then stops, which is why it is called half-open scanning. Another opens a full connection when the scanner lacks permission to craft raw packets. A third probes how the firewall itself behaves. Others quietly check connectionless services or flood a packet with so many flags it is said to be lit up like a holiday tree. Each trick coaxes a different tell out of the target. What do the results actually tell you? For each port, the scanner reports a status. Open means an application is actively accepting connections there. Closed means the firewall allows access, but nothing is listening. Filtered means a firewall is blocking the scanner's view, so the state is unknown. A couple of other states signal that the tool simply could not reach a verdict. Reading these labels is like checking each door. Some are open, some are locked, and some are hidden behind a gate you cannot see past. How does a scanner learn what software is running? It uses a trick called banner grabbing. When the tool opens a connection to a service, that service often greets it with a welcome message. The banner frequently reveals the exact product and version behind the port. From there, an attacker can match that version to known flaws. So a chatty banner is a gift to the wrong person. The lesson is simple. Reduce what your services announce to strangers. Before you scan anything, what must you have first? Explicit, ideally written, permission from the owner of the network. The ability to run a scan is not the right to run it. In some places, scanning a network you do not own is treated as a computer abuse crime, and people have faced prosecution for something as casual as scanning a coffee shop's wireless. So get authorization in writing every time, no matter how harmless the scan feels. Permission first, packets second. So let's bring it together. A vulnerability assessment hunts for exploitable flaws and hands you a prioritized roadmap. A shared protocol gives the whole community one vocabulary, built from naming and scoring standards. Scans come in 4 flavors, and remember, attackers wield the very same tools. Discovery scanning maps the network by finding open ports, using techniques that read each system's reaction, while banner grabbing reveals the software version. Above all, never scan without written permission. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 15.2, part 2. This is the 158th session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part moves past mapping the network and into scans that actually probe for known flaws. In this session, we'll go deeper than the map and start finding real weaknesses. We'll answer several questions. What does a network vulnerability scan add? How can a scan be wrong in two directions? What can no traditional scan ever catch? How do credentials sharpen a scan? And why do web applications need their own kind of scanner? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because knowing a port is open is only half the story. Picture an insurer whose customer portal passes every network check, yet quietly leaks records through a flawed input field. The open port map never sees it. Deeper scanning is what surfaces the actual holes, not just the doorways. On the job, this is the difference between a tidy inventory and a real list of what could get you breached. So what does a network vulnerability scan add? It goes past finding open ports and starts probing for known flaws. These tools carry a database of thousands of documented vulnerabilities, along with tests to check whether a system suffers from each one. Instead of just noting that a door exists, the scanner rattles the handle to see if it gives. The result is a ranked list of specific weaknesses on specific systems. Think of an inspector who does not just count the windows, but tests whether each latch actually holds. How can a scan be wrong in two directions? Because no automated test is perfect. Sometimes the scanner flags a problem that is not really there, a false positive, which wastes an administrator's time chasing a ghost. Far more dangerous is the opposite, a false negative, where the scanner stays silent about a flaw that genuinely exists. The false positive annoys you. The false negative is the one that gets you breached. Treat a clean report with healthy suspicion, not blind relief. What can no traditional scan ever catch? A brand new flaw that nobody has documented yet. Scanners only know what is already in their database, so a vulnerability the vendor has not identified stays invisible. That kind of unknown flaw is what we call a 0-day, and it slips right past ordinary scanning. This is why scanning is necessary but never sufficient. It catches the known, but the truly novel attack arrives with no signature to match. Stay humble about what your tools cannot see. How do credentials sharpen a scan? By letting the scanner log in and look from the inside. By default, scans run without credentials, testing a system the way an outside attacker would. That view is useful, but it is also shallow, and it produces more false alarms. Give the scanner read-only access, and it can read the actual configuration, confirm real versions, and cut down on both false positives and false negatives. An unauthenticated scan checks the locks from the street. An authenticated scan walks the halls with a master key. Do some assets need their own kind of scan? Yes, and wireless networks are a clear example. Specialized tools assess the encryption and security settings of your wireless environment. They can also work alongside passive listening to spot rogue devices that quietly attach themselves to your network. A hidden access point is an open backdoor, and ordinary network scanning may never notice it. When the medium is the air itself, you need a scanner built for the air. Why do web applications need their own kind of scanner? Because they are exposed by design and dangerously powerful. Web servers must offer services straight to the internet, and firewalls usually wave that traffic through untouched. Behind the scenes, those applications often hold privileged access to sensitive databases. Attackers exploit exactly this, using techniques like injecting malicious database commands through a web form. A web application is a storefront with a direct line to the vault, which makes it a favorite target. So what does a web vulnerability scanner actually do? It scours a web application for known flaws that other scanners miss. The tool automatically manipulates inputs and parameters, probing the way an attacker would, then reports what it finds, often with suggested fixes. Crucially, it uncovers weaknesses that a network scan would sail right past because it understands the structure of the application itself. Picture a tester who does not just check that the shop's front door locks, but tries every form on every page. Aren't network scans and web scans basically the same? They rhyme, but they are not twins. Both probe a server's services for known flaws, yet each looks in a different place. A network scan does not dive into the inner workings of a web application, and a dedicated web scan ignores everything that is not a web service. Some tools do both jobs in one package, which we call a hybrid scanner. Before you trust any scanner, confirm it actually covers the objectives you care about. Match the tool to the target. When should you actually run web scans? At every moment of change and on a steady rhythm. Scan every application the first time you start this practice to flush out legacy problems. Scan any new application before it reaches production, and scan any modified one before its code changes go live. Then scan everything on a recurring basis, giving the most sensitive applications the most frequent attention. New, changed, or simply overdue, each is a trigger to scan. Can a rule force you to scan at all? Yes, compliance often makes it mandatory. Certain regulated environments, like those handling payment card data, require regular web application scanning outright, or a dedicated web application firewall as an added layer of protection. In those cases, scanning is not just good hygiene, it is a documented obligation you must be able to prove. When the auditor asks for evidence, a schedule of scans and their results is exactly what you hand over. So, let's bring it together. Network vulnerability scans go past open ports to probe for known flaws, but they can err as false positives or false negatives, and they never catch a 0 day. Authenticated scans see more by logging in, and wireless assets need their own specialized checks. Web applications, exposed and powerful, demand dedicated scanners, sometimes bundled as hybrids. Scan on every change and on a schedule, and remember that compliance can make it mandatory. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 15.2, Part 3. This is the 159th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part finishes the assessment tour by moving from finding flaws to actively exploiting them. In this session, we'll cross the line from spotting weaknesses to attacking them on purpose. We'll answer several questions. How do you scan the database itself? How should you manage what a scan finds? What makes a penetration test different? How much do you tell the testers? And how do you test your own defenses without a live enemy? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a list of flaws is not the same as proof that they can hurt you. Picture a logistics firm sitting on a scan report full of yellow warnings, unsure which ones truly matter. A controlled attack cuts through the noise by showing what an adversary could actually do. On the job, this is how you move from theory to evidence, and how you keep testing from harming the very systems you protect. So how do you scan the database itself? With tools built specifically to probe databases and the applications that front them. Databases hold some of your most valuable information, and while firewalls usually block direct access, a database-backed web application offers a side door. Specialized scanners test both the database and that application layer for weaknesses, including the injection of malicious commands, and some can even exploit a flaw to confirm it is real. Guard the vault, but do not forget the clerk at the counter who can reach inside it. How should you manage what a scan finds? Not as a pile of alerts, but as an orderly workflow. It runs in 3 steps. First, detection, where a scan surfaces a possible flaw. Second, validation, where an administrator confirms it is genuine and not a false alarm. Third, remediation, where you actually fix it. By patching, reconfiguring, working around it, or adding a protective control. And you prioritize by severity, likelihood of exploitation, and difficulty of the fix. Find it, confirm it, fix it, in that order. What makes a penetration test different? It does not stop at finding a flaw, it tries to exploit it. A vulnerability scan points at a weakness and moves on, but a penetration test actively attempts to break in and prove the flaw is real. This takes skilled people and focused effort far more than a routine scan. They follow a disciplined arc, usually described in 4 phases. Think of the difference between an inspector who notes a weak lock and a locksmith you hire to actually pick it. What are those 4 phases? First comes planning, where both sides agree on the scope and the rules of engagement, and the test is explicitly authorized. Then discovery, where testers gather information and scan for weaknesses, blending reconnaissance with automated tools. Next is the attack, where they use exploit tools to actually defeat the defenses, the step that separates a pen test from a mere scan. Finally, reporting, which summarizes what happened and recommends fixes. Plan, discover, attack, report, in a deliberate sequence. How much do you tell the testers up front? That choice defines 3 flavors of test. In a full knowledge test, you hand over detailed information, which skips the reconnaissance and speeds things up. In a partial knowledge test, you share some details to balance realism against cost and time. In a zero knowledge test, the testers start blind, exactly like an outside attacker probing for a way in. More knowledge means faster and cheaper. Less knowledge means more realistic. What could go wrong during the test itself? Quite a lot, because real exploitation carries real risk. A penetration test tries to break things, so it can knock a system offline or corrupt data along the way. That is precisely why the planning phase matters so much. You spell out the rules of engagement and secure explicit approval from senior management before a single packet flies. Never let anyone launch a live attack on a whim. Authorization from the top is the seatbelt for this whole exercise. How do you test defenses built for artificial intelligence? With a specialized practice aimed squarely at machine learning systems. As organizations adopt these models, attackers target flaws unique to them. Testers stage adversarial attacks to find these weaknesses, guided by frameworks and taxonomies made for this domain. They probe for tricking a model with crafted input, poisoning its training data, stealing the model or the data behind it, and abusing its capabilities for harm. A model can be fooled in ways a server never could, so it earns its own kind of stress test. How do you test your defenses without a live enemy? With a platform that safely imitates an attack. This kind of automated simulation plants harmless threat indicators across your systems. A suspicious file here, some beaconing traffic there, to see whether your controls react. It is not really attacking you, it is quietly checking whether your detection and prevention would catch a real intruder. When a control stays silent, you have found a gap worth closing. It is a fire drill for your security stack, run without ever lighting a fire. Why do compliance checks belong in this toolkit? Because regulated organizations must prove their controls are working, not just claim it. A smart approach maps every regulatory obligation to the specific controls that satisfy it. Compliance checks then verify, on a regular schedule, that each of those controls is functioning and meeting the requirement. Run them periodically, and you keep the compliance program healthy and avoid nasty surprises when a regulator comes knocking. It is the routine wellness visit that keeps a small issue from becoming a violation. So, let's bring it together. Database scanners probe the vault and the application in front of it. Manage every finding through detection, validation, and remediation. A penetration test goes beyond scanning to actually exploit flaws, moving through planning, discovery, attack, and reporting. How much you tell the testers sets the white, grey, and black box trade-off. And every test needs senior authorization. Round it out with AI-focused red teaming, safe breach simulations, and regular compliance checks. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 15.3, part 1. This is the 160th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll look at how to catch flaws in code before it ships. We'll answer several questions. Why does software deserve such careful testing? How does peer review harden your code? What is the difference between static and dynamic testing? What extra tools sit alongside them? And what do you owe a vendor when you find their flaw? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a single, unchecked line of code can undo every other control. Picture a fintech startup that ships a payment feature under deadline pressure, skipping review. One overlooked input flaw becomes the breach that makes the news. Testing software is how you stop that story before it starts. On the job, you are often the last set of eyes standing between a developer's shortcut and a production incident. So why does software deserve such careful testing? Because it holds enormous power over everything else. Applications often run with privileged access, handle sensitive data, and lean on databases full of secrets. When they fail, the business can grind to a halt. There is a core design principle here. Software should never assume users behave well. It should expect the unexpected and handle bad input gracefully, a discipline called exception handling. Build software like a bank teller who calmly handles the customer, trying every trick in the book. How does peer review harden your code? By putting a second set of trained eyes on it before it ships. In a code review, developers other than the author examine the work for defects. The review either clears the code for production or sends it back with fixes to make. The most rigorous version, a formal inspection, follows 6 defined stages, from planning through follow-up, each with strict entry and exit criteria. Reserve that heavy ceremony for code where a flaw could be catastrophic. It is the difference between a quick proofread and a full editorial board. What if a formal inspection is overkill? Then you use a lighter touch, which most teams do. You might have a developer walk the team through their code in a meeting. You might require a senior developer to read and sign off on everything before it goes live. Or you might lean on automated tools that flag common flaws before code reaches production. The right process is the one that fits your business and your development culture. Match the rigor to the risk, not to a rulebook. What is static testing? It is checking software without ever running it. Static analysis inspects either the raw source code or the compiled application, usually with automated tools that hunt for common flaws like memory overflows. Because it never executes the code, it can run early and often, right inside the development process. Mature teams hand developers these tools to use as they build, not just at the end. Think of proofreading a recipe for dangerous steps before anyone turns on the stove. Then what is dynamic testing? It is the opposite, checking software while it runs. Dynamic analysis evaluates the application live in a runtime environment, which is often your only option when you did not write the code yourself. A common example is a web scanner probing a running application for injection or scripting flaws. One powerful technique is the synthetic transaction, a scripted action with a known expected result. You run it, compare the output to what you expected, and any mismatch flags a possible bug. Just coordinate carefully, so live testing never disrupts real users. How do you know the software performs well enough? You measure it against a benchmark. A benchmark is a predefined baseline that a system should meet or beat, expressed in metrics like response time, throughput, error rate, and resource use. You watch those numbers under normal load and under stress, then compare against the baseline. If the system falls short, you have found a performance problem to chase. A benchmark is the finish line time you set before the race, so you know whether the runner actually kept pace. What are the testing terms should you recognize? 2 round out the picture. Interactive testing analyzes an application's behavior in real time as it runs, watching its traffic, its components, and its back-end connections all at once. Self-protection is different. It runs right on the server, intercepting the calls flowing into and out of the application and validating those requests as they happen. One watches to learn, the other steps in to defend. Together they blur the line between testing and live protection. What do you owe a vendor when you find their flaw? A responsible, private heads up before the world hears about it. Security professionals often stumble onto unknown vulnerabilities in someone else's product. Ethical disclosure says you tell that vendor first, giving them a fair chance to build a fix. You also give them a reasonable amount of time to act. If they never do, you may responsibly go public, so other professionals can protect themselves. It is the courtesy of knocking before you shout, balanced against the duty to warn everyone else. So let's bring it together. Software earns careful testing because it is powerful and failure-prone, so design it to expect the unexpected. Code review puts peer eyes on your work, from formal inspections to lightweight sign-offs. Static testing checks code at rest, while dynamic testing checks it running, backed by synthetic transactions and benchmarks. Interactive testing and self-protection extend that toolkit. And when you find another vendor's flaw, ethical disclosure guides how you tell them. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 15.3, part 2. This is the 161st session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part continues our software testing tour with the techniques that stress code from the outside. In this session, we'll push software until it shows its weak spots. We'll answer several questions. How do you break code with bad input on purpose? Why must you test the seams between components? How do you probe for deliberate abuse? How do you measure how much you have tested? And how do you keep watching a website once it is live? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because attackers rarely send the input you designed for. Picture a travel platform whose booking form works flawlessly for polite users, then buckles the moment someone pastes a garbled string into it. Testing for the ugly, unexpected case is what keeps that surprise out of production. On the job, your instinct to ask, what happens if I feed this the worst possible data, is exactly what separates robust software from fragile software. So how do you break code with bad input on purpose? With a technique called fuzz testing. Fuzzing floods an application with a torrent of invalid input, either random or deliberately crafted, to push it past its limits. As the software chokes on the garbage, the tester watches for crashes, memory overflows, or any other strange behavior. The goal is to surface flaws that normal, well-formed input would never reveal. Think of shaking a vending machine every possible way to see what makes it jam. Are all fuzzers the same? No. They split into two broad styles. Mutation fuzzing, sometimes called dumb fuzzing, takes real input from actual use and mangles it, flipping characters or tacking on extra data to create fresh garbage. That small tampering is known as bit flipping. Generational fuzzing, the intelligent kind, is smarter. It builds a model of the data the program expects and generates new inputs from that understanding. Just know the limits. Fuzzing rarely covers all the code and tends to catch only simpler flaws, so it is one tool among many. Why must you test the seams between components? Because complex software is stitched together from parts that must cooperate. Different teams build different modules and hand off through well-defined interfaces, so those handoffs are where things silently break. Interface testing checks each module against its interface specification, confirming they will actually work together. It is like inspecting the couplings between train cars, not just the cars themselves. A perfect module, joined by a faulty connection, still derails the whole train. Which interfaces actually need testing? 4 kinds. Application programming interfaces let code modules talk to each other and often reach the outside world, so you confirm they enforce every security rule. User interfaces let people interact with the software, so you verify they behave correctly. Network interfaces carry data between systems, so you test the connection's robustness, its encryption, its authentication, and its error handling. And physical interfaces, which touch machinery or the real world, demand extra care, because a failure there can have real consequences. Test every seam, not just the obvious ones. How do you probe for deliberate abuse? Through misuse case testing. Here you flip your perspective and think like someone trying to break the rules. First, you enumerate the known ways a user might abuse the application, like manipulating inputs to reach another person's account or drain an overdrawn balance. Then you actively attempt those abuses, by hand or with automated tools, to see if the software holds. It is the practice of playing the villain in your own story, so a real villain finds nothing new. Does abuse testing apply to artificial intelligence too? Very much so, with its own twist. A dangerous misuse of a language model is flooding it with overly complex or endlessly repeated prompts, deliberately draining its computing resources until it can no longer serve anyone. That resource exhaustion is a form of denial of service, and it counts as abuse, taking the model's normal function and weaponizing it. So misuse testing for these systems must probe rate limits, resource caps, and input length restrictions. You are checking that the model cannot be bled dry by a flood of demands. How do you measure how much you have actually tested? With a test coverage analysis, you estimate coverage as the number of use cases you tested divided by the total number of use cases expressed as a percentage. The catch is honesty. Nobody can truly enumerate every use case, so the number is inherently subjective. You can slice coverage several ways. Did every branch execute? Every condition, every function, every loop, every single statement? Treat the percentage as a rough compass, not a precise gauge, and always question how it was computed. How do you keep watching a website once it is live? With two complementary styles of monitoring, passive monitoring captures real traffic as it flows, giving you a true picture of what actual users experience, and a variant even reconstructs individual user journeys. Synthetic monitoring, by contrast, fires artificial transactions at the site, from a simple page request to a full scripted flow, to measure performance on demand. Passive only sees a problem after a real user hits it, while synthetic can catch trouble before anyone does. Pair them, and you both feel the present and probe the future. So let's bring it together. Fuzz testing hurls bad input to trigger hidden flaws in mutation and generational styles, though its coverage is limited. Interface testing checks the seams across application, user, network, and physical interfaces. Misuse case testing plays the villain, including draining an AI model as a denial of service. Test coverage analysis estimates how much you covered imperfectly. And website monitoring pairs passive and synthetic views to watch a live site. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 15.4. This is the 160-second session of the CISSP exam prep series. In this session, we'll look at how live exercises sharpen a security team. We'll answer several questions. Why stage a mock battle at all? Who plays which role? What happens when the teams compare notes? And where do these exercises safely take place? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because reading about an attack is nothing like living through one. Picture an operations team that has never actually fended off a live intrusion, then faces a real one at 2 a.m. An exercise gives them that first fight in a safe setting. On the job, these drills build the muscle memory and calm that no slide deck ever will. So why stage a mock battle at all? Because a friendly competition teaches what lectures cannot. Pitting attackers against defenders surfaces real weaknesses in your systems, much like a penetration test does. It also gives your staff hands-on practice at both breaking in and holding the line. That dual experience sharpens skills and raises awareness across the whole technical team. Think of a fire drill that is actually fun to run. So who plays which role? Exercises usually split into 3 coloured teams. The red team are the attackers, working to break into the systems. The blue team are the defenders, hardening and watching the environment, often given a head start to prepare before the assault begins. The white team are the neutral referees, judging the contest, settling disputes, capturing lessons learned, and making sure the exercise never harms real production. Attackers, defenders, and referees, each with a clear job. What happens when the 2 sides compare notes? You get purple teaming. Once the exercise ends, the red and blue teams sit down together and walk each other through what they did. The attackers reveal their tactics. The defenders explain what they saw. And everyone learns from the exchange. Combine red and blue, and you get purple, which is exactly where the name comes from. It is the debrief that turns a contest into shared knowledge. Is there a playful way to run these drills? Yes, the capture the flag format. Here the red team gets concrete objectives, like disrupting a website or stealing a specific file from a protected system. The exercise is scored on how many objectives the attackers achieve versus how many the defenders block. That scoreboard makes the drill competitive and genuinely engaging. It turns hard security practice into a game people actually want to win. Where do these exercises safely take place? rarely on live production, if you are careful. Many organizations build a dedicated environment just for the exercise, a safe playground where an attack cannot damage real operations. Some drills skip real systems entirely. In a tabletop exercise, participants simply gather in a room and talk through their response to a made-up scenario. No packets, no risk, just people reasoning aloud. Choose the setting that gives real practice without real casualties. So let's bring it together. Security exercises expose weaknesses and build hands-on skill through friendly competition. The red team attacks, the blue team defends, and the white team referees. Afterward, purple teaming brings the two sides together to share what they learned. Capture the flag adds a scored, game-like edge. And you run it all in a dedicated environment or as a tabletop, so the practice never puts production at risk. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 15.5. This is the 163rd session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll look at the ongoing management routines that keep a security program honest. We'll answer several questions. Why do these management reviews matter? How do you keep an eye on your logs? How do you confirm accounts stay in line? How do you know backups and continuity actually work? How do you keep people prepared? And how do you track the program's health at a glance? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because controls that nobody reviews quietly drift out of alignment. Picture a growing company where departed employees still hold active accounts and last quarter's backups have silently been failing. No breach yet, but the ground is soft. These management routines are how you catch that decay early. On the job, you are the one who makes oversight a habit instead of an afterthought. So why do these management reviews matter? Because they form the feedback loop that watches over the whole program. They give leadership real oversight. And just by existing, they discourage insiders from abusing their access. Because someone is clearly watching, they also generate valuable data you can feed into other security tasks. Each review should follow a standard process and end with formal management approval. Think of them as the regular checkups that keep a patient healthy, not the emergency room visit after something breaks. How do you keep an eye on your logs? By centralizing and reviewing them deliberately. A security information and event management platform gathers log data from across your devices and applications, automating much of the routine work. For this to be trustworthy, every system's clock must be synchronized, so events from different sources line up on one honest timeline. Managers should also review logs for sensitive actions, making sure privileged users are not abusing their power. When your team can read anyone's files, someone must be reading the readers. How do you confirm accounts stay in line? Through account management reviews. The goal is simple. Make sure users hold only the permissions they are supposed to, with no unauthorized additions. One thorough approach compares the list of who actually has access against the list of who should, and flags any mismatch, though its cost usually limits it to privileged accounts. When a full review is too expensive, you take a random sample instead. And random truly means random. If administrators pick the sample or use loaded criteria, you will miss entire pockets of error. Many identity platforms can automate this review and keep the audit trail. How do you know backups and continuity actually work? By testing them, not trusting them. Continuity controls keep you running during a disruption, and disaster recovery gets you back on your feet quickly afterward. But neither helps if it silently fails. Consistent backups are the backbone, so managers should periodically inspect the results, checking logs, verifying integrity values, or actually restoring a file to prove it works. Regular testing of your recovery and continuity controls is what turns a hopeful plan into real assurance. An untested backup is only a promise, not a safety net. How do you keep your people prepared? Through training and awareness that never really stops. It starts with initial training for anyone new to the organization or new to a role, tailored to the specific security duties they will carry. Then recurring training keeps everyone current on shifting threats and a changing environment. To measure whether it sticks, many organizations run phishing simulations, sending fake lures and routing anyone who takes the bait straight to a quick lesson. People are a control too, and like any control, they need regular tuning. How do you track the program's health at a glance? By watching a handful of key indicators over time. You pick metrics that reveal how the program is really doing. Things like the number of open vulnerabilities, how long they take to fix, how many accounts have been compromised, and how often audit findings keep recurring. Then you gather them onto a dashboard and post it where managers and the security team will see it regularly. A good dashboard turns scattered data into a single, honest pulse reading for the whole program. So let's bring it together. Security management reviews are the feedback loop that keeps oversight alive and deters insider abuse. Log reviews centralize and scrutinize activity, especially by privileged users, on a synchronized timeline. Account reviews confirm people hold only what they should, using full checks or truly random samples. Test your backups and recovery instead of trusting them. Keep training continuous and watch key indicators on a dashboard. Do these consistently, and your controls stay provably effective over time. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session.